Hello, ladies and gents. This is Chris Lester for the Raven and the Writing Desk, and I am here in the virtual studio with Philippa Ballantine. Pip is a New Zealand-born fantasy author and podcaster. She's the author of the Books of the Order and the Shifted World series. Together with her husband, Tim Morris, she created the Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences and the nonfiction book Social Media for Writers. She's won a number of literary awards, including the Sir Julius Vogel Award, the RT Reviewer's Choice Award, and the Parsec Award. Her new novel is called Immortal Progeny, and it will be released on March 24th, 2017. Pip, welcome back to the Raven and the Writing Desk.
Lovely to be here and lovely to see you again.
Likewise. Why don't you start out by telling us what this book is about and how it came to be?
Okay. Immortal Progeny is... came after the Books of the Order. And the Books of the Order, if you remember, people had kind of abandoned religion. So I wanted to write a book that explored religion and gods and fanaticism, basically. My least favorite thing in the world. So I decided to set this world in the middle of a great big religious war, except that the religious war is fought between various factions who create giant Frankenstein monsters, sort of cobbled together kaiju, and fight each other with them. And because, why not? And it brings up interesting sort of thoughts about, people using the natural world in ways that it was not meant to use. And in the world, they don't know exactly where gods come from, but gods do definitely exist, and they come through some kind of it's a portal called the God Void. Where the gods actually originate from, though, is a mystery. And the story starts off when 3 small children appear out of the God Void, and everyone's startled because they're expecting, gods with like lightning bolts, and that's how they generally appear. And none have appeared for a very long time. So these 3 sisters are separated and go on different journeys and have different experiences. And in the book, start to come into their powers and what that means for the fighting gods. Also, I have atheist magicians because you can't have gods without somebody who disbelieves them. So
yeah, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So even though they came out of the God Void, did people not know that these little girls are actually gods, or is there confusion about that, or what?
There is confusion. They don't appear to have any of the signs of being gods, and because they kind of fear them, but they also want to use them. That's why they separate them. They decide to try and keep an eye on them. And up until the point where they're sort of in their early 20s, there appears to be nothing special particularly about them so far.
So, this book is dealing with religion in a second world fantasy setting, a world that is not ours. You and I are part of a religious contingent that's often overlooked in American culture and politics. We're both practicing Christians, but we come from mainline Protestant denominations that have more liberal values in a social setting. So how has your faith influenced your writing?
I was actually brought up in New Zealand in an Anglican girls' school. Anglican is sort of equivalent of the Episcopalians in America. So as I said earlier, the thing I really hate is fanaticism, the idea that my way is the right way and the rest of you are wrong and I must push it upon you. I think that has led the world into a lot of terrible trouble and disaster and suffering. So the Fragile Gods series, it's going to be a series, is about the horrors of fanaticism and the middle path, the tolerant path is better for us. And the sisters sort of different, the 3 of them embody different aspects of the religion, and 2 of them are definitely fanatical. And the sister who has experienced a lot more pain, a a lot more of the dark side of humanity is actually the one that is led towards the more tolerant path, which some people might not think would be the best path, but she will show them the way, hopefully.
So, can you unpack a bit more about what you mean by fanaticism in this context, and why you think it's so dangerous, and why you felt compelled to write about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, the fanatics are the religious temples. They're constantly fighting amongst themselves to become the one true God. That is their entire reason for fighting each other. And they destroy each other's temples, but they also trample over, villages, people who are just living their lives, just trying to get by, get the harvest in, that sort of thing. So I think there's obviously lots of parallels in our world where, just people who just want to live, they just want to raise their children, they just want to practice their religion, but they don't necessarily want everyone to take it on, get uprooted and destroyed. I mean, you have to look at to Syria and what's happening there, where people are just their towns being decimated, and fanatics don't really care about how many innocent people they hurt, and religion is often used to batter people, basically, and destroy their lives. And I don't think that religion always has to do that, but I feel like in the world right now there's a lot of draw to that sort of fanaticism. And I understand that it's really easy. It's easy for people to say, I will follow that person who's saying that thing. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to question your own morals or your own personality or anything. You just follow that person, and it's super easy. And I think the harder path is to examine ourselves and try and be more tolerant of others, because diversity and the differences between people is what makes them interesting, I think.
How has your religion or your approach to your religion changed over the course of your adult life?
Well, the interesting thing was when I was going to school, I went to an Anglican school and I went to an Anglican church every week. But then, sort of in your 20s, I kind of drifted away. It wasn't as important to me. I found when I moved to America, the dream that I had was having a community of like-minded people sharing just their lives and helping each other. And I thought about that when I was younger. I was like, wouldn't that be nice to find? And I had never found it. Mm-hmm. But in America, I really started looking for it. And I said to T, my husband, I want to be in a church where, difference is celebrated, where there is diversity and kindness, where LGBTQ is not, excluded. People of different cultures are not excluded. And he was like, where can that be? Because we are surrounded by churches where we are. So I went online and we found an Episcopal church, Trinity, in Manassas, Virginia, and two wonderful people who I thought exemplify diversity. One is Vinny, who is a female Episcopal priest, and Stuart, who is they just have wonderful personalities, and they don't agree a lot. Sometimes they disagree quite a lot, but they enjoy each other's company because of those differences. And as soon as I was in there, I was like, this is reflecting what I think religion should be, which is walking the talk rather than just talking it. And we had our child baptized there, and when she was 10, and yeah, they're really good people.
Excellent. So let's talk about those atheist magicians. This is an interesting world building choice, especially given that you are a person of faith yourself. And so, deliberately choosing to give special powers to the atheists in the setting is an interesting choice. What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, one, I certainly know a lot of very fine atheists. Alex White, who actually runs our Smoky Mountain writing retreat, is an atheist. But he is a fine example of an atheist to me. He is not militant, again, with the fanaticism.
Right.
Atheists can be as fanatical as theists. So for those people in the world of the fragile gods who they believe there is magic in the world, but they believe it does not come from gods. It is a natural part of the world. And they sort of almost have like a meditation technique to get in touch with this magic that they believe is in the world. And they're unfortunately rather put upon because they're kind of caught in the middle of all of these giant monsters and mad churches. So they're actually kind of like the resistance. They turn up to villages that might be getting trampled upon or, about to be destroyed by the local church and try and help them out. But they're definitely not the winning side at the moment, but they are there. But I mean, I think there's a place for questioning of things anywhere. And actually, Alex White is actually now, thanks to social media, friends with our priest, Vinny. And Alex was visiting once and he didn't, he said, we invited him. We said, would you like to come to church? He was like, oh no, I might burst into flames. So we told that to Vinny and she said, well, he's not a very good atheist then, is he? So Alex has promised next time that he will come with us to Trinity, and we'll see if he catches fire.
Have to document it for scientific.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have our phones at the ready just in case. Final proof. But yeah.
So let's talk a bit about the use of religion in speculative fiction.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've noticed a lot in science fiction and fantasy is that even when there are religions in a setting, it's pretty rare for the protagonist herself to be religious in any serious way.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that's more true the more closely the religion in the story resembles a real world counterpart religion. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, is there a missed opportunity here? Should writers consider making their protagonist a person of faith, and why or why not?
I feel like, I've read The Handmaid's Tale. I think there is definitely a trend, or especially recently, to align religion with autocracy. People, or theocracy, I suppose it would be, wouldn't it? To have religion on the right, to always be, authoritarian.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly feel like the liberal Christians, like you and I, are not really represented in there. And I feel like that is kind of a missed opportunity. But then again, I arrived from my hair is looking like a spaniel. When I arrived in America, honestly, I always assumed American Christianity to me was associated with, televangelists and Bible thumping and giant churches with, massive aquariums and, limousines, all that sort of stuff. That's what I imagined American Christianity to be. So it was nice to find something that was smaller and more intimate, because I like to have a relationship with the people running the church, rather than being 300, 500 seats back from the end. So I think maybe people aren't seeing the diversity of Christianity that's in America. And I think there is probably a good opportunity to have a person of faith that's the protagonist, that is, using Jesus's teachings to choose her path or his path.
Or Muhammad or Buddha or,
yes, whichever. Yeah, whichever.
Or the crystal dragon or whatever the religion is in your particular, world setting.
Ours is a cauliflower. We worship a cauliflower.
I thought you guys worshipped the pineapple.
Yeah. The pineapple, man, no. That's the devil's fruit.
What is a work of science fiction or fantasy? It could be in any medium that you think handled religion really well, and why did it work?
There's a really good. I mean, it's not really called science. You know how literary fiction and science fiction sometimes blend together. But there was a really good book. It's written by a New Zealander whose name just splits my mind, but it's called The Vintner's Luck. And it's about an angel and a vintner, a guy that grows grapes. And it was a love story between the angel and the man, but it was like a spiritual love relationship rather than necessarily a physical one. But to me, the feel of that book was kind of gentle, if it makes any sense, gentle and loving, which kind of spoke to me. I can't think of anything that's kind of touched me in the sort of the same way. They also made a terrible movie out of it. Don't watch the movies. It's a terrible movie.
And to look at it from the opposite direction, what's a common mistake that you think that writers of speculative fiction make when it comes to religion?
Common mistakes. Again, I would feel like they're not showing the totality of different kinds of religions. Like you said, I mean, I would love to see a Muslim protagonist, a Buddhist one. I would think a Buddhist hero would be, or heroine would be, fantastic. And I feel like that as people search for diversity, they should also be searching for diversity in religions.
You mean in terms of the representation?
Yes, a representation of them. Yeah. I mean, I love me some atheists, but they don't have to be the protagonist all the time.
Right. So for writers who work in second world fantasies, created worlds, what advice would you give to them about including religion in their settings? What are some of the things to think about as you're building your world?
Well, you have to, I mean, having an actual physical God be in your book, you have to decide if there are going to be any limitations to what they do. I mean, obviously, as a god, that makes them difficult to deal with. In Fragile Gods, the gods, I mean, when you think of Jesus, he didn't arrive like in an armored tank or coming as a giant elephant with scale armor. He was just a guy. And
he was a baby,
baby, like, and grew up as a young man. I mean, you can't think of anything more fragile and easily destroyed than that. So you don't necessarily have to have a god that is all sound and thunder and lightning bolts and miracles sprouting everywhere. I guess that comes back to the gentleness of things. But you also want to think about how the religion that is around the gods is also very important. Are they a militant faction that wants to make everyone believe? What is their relationship to other religions? Are they accepting? Are they not accepting? I think it's a lot to do with the relationship between divinity and humanity and how that works. What is the physical, the little things as well? What are the ways that people show that they're religious? What are their day-to-day activities that might involve that religion? So there's a lot to unpack as far as religion and its place in sort of the society that you're going to build as well.
Yeah, it's not something that you can just sort of layer in over top as an afterthought. Religion is such a it provides such foundational components
Yeah, like life, I
to
mean, birth and death. I mean, the two
hmm
bookends for humanity. How does religion fit into those? Those are important mile markers for people. Marriage,
hmm
how's that sorted out between the divine and the human? So yeah, if you're going to, I think when you're doing any world building, you have to think about religion, what people believe in, what sort of faith they have or don't have. But if you're going to be writing a book which centers around religion, you've got to be even more precise about how things are. And it's very interesting to actually have to sit and think about how just everything fits together, how one thing affects the other.
hmm Yeah, like what are the social functions
Mm-hmm.
of religion within society? What, a lot of times atheists tend to look at, especially militant atheists tend to look at religion and say, this thing is, archaic. It's a bunch of people believing silly stories that were made up by shepherds in a distant country. But what you have to think about, what is the function of religion within a society?
Mm-hmm.
It's not all about autocracy and a small group of people controlling what other people do with their lives. It
Mm-hmm.
has a social function, and you have to deal with that social function. And even if you decide that a particular society doesn't have a religion, you have to think about what other institution takes its place in
Yeah.
performing those functions.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at history, I mean, if you lived in a small village in England, like in Anglo-Saxon times, the church was everything. I mean, they set the holy days
Mhm.
where you would have off. I mean, the festivals, the marriages, the births, everything was centered around the church. You went to the church to be part of a community. So yeah, even if you decide not to, what's going to take its place? Because that's a big vacuum to fill.
And so stepping back from second world fantasies to look at stories that are told in some version of our world,
Mm-hmm.
which could be hidden fantasy like Harry Potter, or urban fantasy. It could be alternate histories or steampunk, could be science fiction taking place in the future. What advice would you give to authors who are looking to write fantasies in our world in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how they negotiate with religion?
Well, if you're going to do any kind of religion, I think you've obviously got to do your research. If it's a religion that you're not familiar with, maybe if you're like when we wrote the Ghost Rebellion, from a cultural standpoint, we found somebody who was familiar with India and someone who was familiar with Russia. I think that you should do the same thing if you're diving into somebody else's religion that you're not familiar with. Do all your research, but find somebody who is within that religious community, and uh, and get them to have a look over what you have written and made sure that it's accurate and representative. Because religion is very important to people. It's one of those things that you've got to try and get right. And I think sometimes when you do consider, like when you just mentioned Harry Potter, the fact that there's not really any religion mentioned in Harry Potter is now that I think about it, a little odd, because the
Yeah.
Anglican Church in England is, if you're living in a village, again, like the pub, it's one of the two social centers. So I would just say always consider what that social religious binding is. Yeah, and just tread carefully, like any cultural thing that you're writing about. Just make sure that you're aware of the tripping points and the sensitivities of it, and get a really good beta reader. They call them sensitivity readers now.
Hmm.
I had somebody at a convention roll their eyes. They went, "Oh, publishers are getting sensitivity readers now. Oh, if you like that sort of thing." And to me, it's not about necessarily just about sensitivity. It's about getting things right.
Yeah.
And as a writer, you try. You're not going to please everybody, but it's always a good idea to try to get it as right as you possibly can.
Right. And even if you are, making value judgments about some particular religious system or religious practice, you at least need you owe it to yourself to have the facts right as you're presenting it. Like, even if you're going to come down on the side of this thing is negative or unhealthy, you damn well better know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Otherwise you will be getting those people contacting you afterwards to or you'll just turn readers off. They won't say anything to you. They just won't read you anymore.
And you're not going to do yourself or your side any favors either, because you're just going to come off looking ignorant. And that's not a good thing.
No, we don't. We don't want to look ignorant.
Where did you find your accuracy, your cultural consultants, and how do you go about that process?
Well, actually, we've been very lucky in the fact that we've been to a lot of conventions and stuff. So we've met a lot of people. Our steampunk India consultant was Sunadasi, who we met online. Actually, we've never met her in real life, but she's become quite a good friend of ours, and she runs the Steampunk India page. So we were like, okay, she's good. But I have also heard people going online. I think Lauren Harris was talking about, was it Reddit? There are some lists online where people who are looking for a consultant can go and find them. But we've been lucky in the fact that all the people we've used have been friends that we've made just over the course of like 6 years, 10 years of writing. So yeah, I'd say poke around on the internet. You're bound to find somebody.
Say hi to people at conventions, make friends.
Be friendly. Yeah. I think I've been to quite a few diversity panels, especially steampunk is very concerned about diversity and has been for many years, which I think puts it out ahead of some other genres. A lot of the people that you see on panels are interested in getting authors getting things right. Like, we went to one where they literally said, just ask us, So if you go to those sort of panels and, maybe not give them the entire book, but at least give them the bits that deal with, their sections.
Do your research before you write the book.
Yes.
Just throwing that out there.
Yes. Do as much research. Yeah, you can research as much as you can, but then give it to somebody before, letting it out into the wild.
Right.
Luckily, I didn't have to worry about the Frankenstein monster people. And there might be some out there, I don't know, but I might offend them.
The Church of the Kaiju.
That's right. No one wants to offend them. They just come and stomp on your house.
Right. So what's next for you? What are you working on this year?
What are we working on? Well, we have Operation Endgame, which was the last book of the ministry.
Why the quotes? Why the scare quotes?
You never know, right? We have batted around an idea of a few spin-off characters. Maybe Sophia Del Morte might get her own standalone book. We are also doing a YA series, which is the Ministry 7, Verity Fitzroy and the Ministry 7. We're working on the 6th book of that. So the Ministry is not really going away anywhere anytime soon, but Eliza Wellington's story will be finished for now. And then I'm working on a apocalyptic librarian story, which is, as being a librarian for 13 years, it's in my wheelhouse. And obviously the librarians are going to be the ones that save us from the apocalypse. I'm just putting that out there.
Well, I mean, anybody who saw the Book of Eli knows that.
That's right. And then I've got to write the sequel to Immortal Progeny, which will probably be Immortal something else. I had a title, but the Book of the Fragile Gods is at least three novels. So, I'm keeping myself busy.
Do you have any convention appearances this year?
We're going to be at RavenCon, which is in Williamsburg, Virginia. That's in April, I think. And we're going to make an appearance at BaltiCon, which will probably just be a drive-by on Saturday to wave at all the people. You're going to be there, right?
I am. We are having a Metamore City live performance. I don't know when it's going to be yet, but we'll have one.
Okay, well, count us in. We'd love to be amongst all the wonderful podcast people. And then I'm going to go, then we're going to Detroit. We're going to be in Detroit in July, I think, for the Motor City SteamCon, which are full of fabulous people. I don't know what it is about Detroit, but I've come to enjoy the people there a great deal, and the city is, fighting back.
It is.
So it has changed even in it was like 2 years between visits for us, and I was like, oh, okay, and they've got quite a nice.
I can recommend a good breakfast place in downtown Detroit. It's near the Fox. I think it's near the Fox Theater. I'll have to get the details on it and get back to you. But we were there just back in February. Mel and I, and we met up with some friends who moved to Detroit to start a mushroom factory.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how all these really organic or enthusiastic creative people are moving into Detroit, and I think that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Get some energy in there, some young energy.
So where can people find your stuff?
Well, pjballantine.com is the hub, and then if you are interested in steampunk, then we are over at ministryofpeculiaroccurrences.com, and if you can spell that, you deserve to be able to go. I know after so many years how to spell Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences, but I know it can be a handful.
You guys just need to buy like mopo.com and link it,
People can spell that, yeah. But we're all over the place. We're Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest, and it's everywhere. You can't avoid us.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Raven and the Writing Desk, Pip. It was great to have you back.
Yeah, it was great to be on. Thanks for having me.